Uh, oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Today's May 22nd. Yeah, wow. And we have a couple topics on the agenda. So, Rich, why don't you kick us off?
Yes, I'm trying to see if we should I share my screen?
You should be able to.
Do you see the notes doc?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, finally we're here. So I just wanted to use this time to bring attention to some of the open PRs. Maybe not all of them are super important, but the first one was trying to make a change to this API server metric, the most important one, the SLI duration seconds. And then I think they're trying to add a dry run label to the metric. Right now, I think this metric is computing latency for dry run equals true requests also, which might not reflect the actual latency of the real requests, non-dry run requests. I thought it was okay, but I just wanted to float this by the SIG to gather thoughts on this. And another related thing is that there are some other deprecated metrics, this SLO duration seconds. Maybe there are more. Maybe we should do a sweep of such deprecated metrics, and is it okay to just remove them from the code now? Are deprecated. They are hidden. Like after the deprecation period, they should be hidden automatically by our code.
Mm-hmm.
So it should be safe to remove.
Okay.
And for your first question about the dry run,
Yeah.
I think dry run doesn't make sense in that particular metric because SLI is meant as a way to reflect the kind of the most curated version of the request that go through the whole flow. So
Yeah.
initially we removed um, the admission plugin and so on, so admission webhooks and so on to impact the SLI. Like they don't impact the SLI metric anymore. So I
That's
think for dry
right.
run it should be the same.
Yeah, but right now, the way it is, I think we are including the dry run requests also while computing the
Yeah.
metric.
So I think the best would be to add a if statement and not like include these requests in the metric at all.
Yeah, so that's what I also suggested. But then this person, the author, raised a good point saying that then users might suddenly see a drop. Is that okay? Or is a more non-breaking change to include this label in the metric so that there's nothing breaking, and if they want to just look at the non-dry request, they can just filter the metric by that label.
To remove them as a whole because like dry run request doesn't count for a lot compared to normal requests. Like normally dry runs you would only run them like yourself as a user and not
Mm-hmm.
an application. Unless I'm not seeing like one cases, but normally I think that should not impact at all the SLO that they are seeing.
It looks like this metric is currently alpha, so I think given that, it's reasonable to modify the way the metric works to be more in line with the original intent.
Okay.
If it was beta,
Mhm.
I would feel more strongly
The
um,
breakability
about not breaking it.
sounds good. Okay. I can respond
I
back
don't
to
know.
the PM.
Does that do we actually believe the stability level accurately reflects whether or not people are depending on this? I saw you shake your head, Damien.
Not really. Yeah, I'm not like I wouldn't have it as like a even if it was better or stable, I think this should still be addressed. Because like that's
Stable, I
not
would.
hmm?
If it was stable, I would. We would need to make a new metric to get that.
I don't know because the thing is like this is only a very small subset of the data that we collect. And I don't think like it's like to me it's rather a bug that it's included in the SLI metric rather than an actual like something that is intended. Because we already have this information in the more general API duration seconds metric, like in the normal histogram.
Mhm.
So excluding it from this one should be fine. But also, yeah, we should definitely graduate the SLI metric.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe another action item here is to actually take a sweep across metrics and figure out the ones that are okay to be promoted. There's a ton right now at alpha. We need to establish some, I don't know, cadence to go through those metrics and have a graduation schedule for metrics, I guess.
Just to be clear, just for my own
It's meant for
curiosity,
the, oh, sorry, yeah.
The stability levels don't dictate the behavior of the metric, though, right? I mean, once a metric goes into stable, its behavior could still slightly or more or less change, right?
You're right, but I think there's an expectation that the thing that it measures will still roughly stay the same. Like if someone wanted to change the meaning of one of our core, API server metrics and have it apply to a different set of things, it's a pretty good signal that. But you're right, like subtle behavioral changes like this probably aren't covered, or may not be covered.
But yeah, I think that could also go the other way, where if, let's say, a metric goes into stable, and then we find out that there's a pretty major use case that we don't cover for it, and that is a valid use case. So in that case, do we deprecate the metric? Because as it is right now, I think it stays stable, but we also cover that use case, even though it's a major change. But if I'm wrong, if it point out.
Depends kind of on the case. Like for example, I think creating a new metric when we needed a SLI metric for the API server that doesn't include the webhooks, that was necessary because like that's a huge change in behavior compared to what it was before.
Mm-hmm.
But like for the dry run, I would side like against like creating a new metric because it's very subtle and it shouldn't really impact dashboards and alerts, nor the baseline. So in that case, I would personally be siding to allow it. But
Yep.
in the other case, I wouldn't allow it.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I was just concerned about, this lock-in once a metric goes, into higher stability levels, where, the assumption is kind of locked in on what it's supposed to do, and there's no major changes that could happen. But yeah, for the dry run, yeah, I think it shouldn't be there even in the first place. Like, why do we factor that into this metric? Because it's an SLO, right? So it's supposed to reflect what's actually happening. But yeah.
Okay, so we are agreeing that we will just modify the way the metric works. We will not record this for trial requests. Great. Okay, maybe we can move on to the next one. There's a lot on the agenda. This one is another one. This is KSMPR. And then I think they are trying to record zeros for the metric when there has been no restarts, which doesn't happen today, and it's somehow affecting their ability to set alerts on this metric. I don't know how urgent this is. Maybe we can just discuss this offline if it's not super concerning.
Like alerting on restart doesn't sound great. But I wonder what's the underlying problem there.
Can I see their original? Is there no way to have a query that defaults to 0 when the metric isn't present?
You can set you can say if the metric is not present, like in the query, put vector 0, and then you would have a flat line at 0.
Okay, why are they not doing that then? Okay.
Well,
fine.
I'm not quite as good at PromQL as maybe the rest of you. It may be,
Yeah, me
it may not be
neither.
that simple, but
Yeah, maybe I can tell them what they can do.
Is the metric absent or is it, what do they mean null value?
The data is not emitted whenever
I
there
mean,
is
there's
no
no
restarts.
from QL though, right? Either the metric is absent or it has a value.
Uh-huh. So it is absent.
Yeah, they could just use absent and then, the metric, and that would basically be, what they could use for this.
Victor, like you can specify like their query or vector 0, and that
Yeah.
would like if the metric is not present or like if the query doesn't yield any result, it would set
Default to a
0.
value. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can suggest that to them.
Okay, great. Should I just CC you here?
Yes.
Yeah. But I
Thank you.
wonder, this is, it's probably not, but if this could be a bug within the code base itself. Yeah.
Could be. Could be,
Yeah.
definitely.
Cool. And the last one that I have was some request for prom adapter release, but I saw that Pranshu has already opened an issue for its deprecation. So I guess that it's kind of addressed by that. We can just skip this and go on to the next ones.
Like submitted the request, like saying that this was going to be deprecated.
I think
I
it was.
wanted anyway to cut a release before we like fully deprecate the project so that they have a fresh release to base themselves on. And I think JP already sent some PRs to update some of the dependencies.
Okay,
So I just need to, like, once I'm done with metric server, I will move to Prometheus adapter.
sounds good. Thank you so much for that. I'll link the issue here once I find it. Marek is not here.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
think
reviewed this PR this morning, and I think
Yeah,
it was
I saw.
merged already.
Yeah, it's merged already.
There
There
is
is
only
one.
one point.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, sorry about that.
no worries.
Yeah, and the point is that like there is a stable metric that cannot be changed, and I was like, oh, we need to do something about that.
Yeah.
So like I think, and David, you can remind me because I know Han and Ligit wanted to make sure that anything that is stable doesn't get deprecated or removed ever. Like that was discussion at one point. I don't know. Like I know that for the APIs, that's settled and they don't want to remove any stable APIs from the code base.
Yep.
But has any decision been made for the metrics? I know Han wanted to do the same, but I don't know if we settled on it.
so based on the,
oh, sorry, go ahead,
sorry. Yeah, just speaking for the docs, we currently on the website it says we can deprecate a stable metric after 4 releases.
Yep. Yeah, but we had discussion in the past to maybe do something else. And yeah, I don't remember if we had a conclusion or not.
Yeah, I mean, that feels inappropriate for some stable metrics, but maybe appropriate for others. Like there's some metrics where I would never want them to be removed ever. And then there are other metrics that could be marked stable, but where like a migration or something could be reasonable if they're not some of the less used ones, but are also marked stable. So kind of two minds. It would be nice if it was possible to deprecate a metric without ever having plans to actually remove it, but just to guide people towards whatever the correct one is, if that makes sense.
That's what we should do, but that means
That's-
renaming, like introducing a new metric with a new name.
Right, do that,
That's
then
could
mark
be
the old one
fine.
deprecated, but never remove it.
Yeah, that's what I would do.
There's actually, it's partially possible without introducing a metric. So we have this hidden metrics thing in the
Yeah.
metrics aid, where for the last release of a deprecated metric, you could still access a metric that's not actually exposed.
That's a good point. Like we could probably remove stable or deprecate stable metrics and have them become hidden by default even, but never remove them from the code base so that someone can always unhide them. Something like that, where stable metrics never actually get removed, but they do get hidden. Not sure what people think about that.
Like maybe Legit would have a different opinion. I don't know. What's his stance towards all these things?
Just a follow-up to that. So what happens if a stable metric that was deprecated conflicts with another metric, like way in the future? So, people don't remember that this was deprecated, but what if that happens? There's a conflict between same metric names for stable metric.
It's a good
If
question.
it's hidden, we need to keep it in the stability framework file so that it doesn't collide ever.
That could be one. I mean, there's certainly ways today that we prevent metric collisions, right, in tests. So maybe tests need to default to including hidden metrics or something like that.
But even if we were like, I think the only case where we want to deprecate a stable metric would be to replace it with a new one that does partially the same thing but differently. So, like, we would do the change in one PR. So the chance of duplicating the name is quite low.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry, I don't want to take up a lot of time, but it's just, yeah, if the releases are like close, if it's just like n+1, n+2, then that's fine. But if it's like a bit more than that, then people could, yeah, we can take that offline.
About the behavior. Because like we would go through that process for Marek's PR, so or like for
Yeah.
Marek's issue. So we can do it alongside.
Or maybe have a dedicated issue for this. You have to address this for all the stable metrics anyway. Have a process for it.
And update the doc.
Yeah. Okay, I can see if I can open up a issue for this, and then we can continue the discussion there. Do we have enough time for you, David?
Oh, sure. I just wanted to follow up on, so I started a Slack thread in the Prometheus dev channel with the guy who implemented native histogram support in Prometheus. And it sounds like yeah, it's a little bit frustrating because their migration plans were mostly based around the idea that there's someone who owns their application and also owns their Prometheus server and wants to migrate from fixed bucket histograms to native histograms. And so it's like very much geared towards, okay, you update your application and then you update your Prometheus server to do both. And then you migrate your alerts and then you update your Prometheus server to only do native histograms, right? And that's like the path they've thought through. But basically the answer is we need to treat enabling native histograms on a metric as potentially breaking for users. And the recommendation is that we don't do it for all metrics, that we pick, this is what Mimir is going to do. So we don't have to follow this advice, but the idea was we should probably start with a few metrics that really benefit from using the native histogram format, make an opt-in feature that enables it for those specific metrics, and then increase the scope of which metrics are opted in based on feedback and usage, but not try and do like a flip it on for every metric in the whole world type feature. not sure. People agree, disagree, thoughts?
That would be, I guess, simpler for migrating for the users, but we would still break them anyway. And we would have to somehow communicate to the user which metric migrated, or like have their equivalent in native histograms, so that they can like figure out the migration. And that also means that instead of having to migrate over one release, they would have to do it like over time. Let's say every n+1 release, they would have to update their alerts again and again and again.
Right. So essentially, Kubernetes would expose something that allows opting into enabling native histograms. So you would have to first flip on our flag that's opt-in. Then you would go to your Prometheus server and flip on basically then the user can follow the whole migration guide. It doesn't quite work for managed solutions like GKE or something, because if we flip on the flag for a user and they're hitting and they're the ones that are monitoring that Prometheus endpoint, then like they could still be broken. So it's never safe for us to turn on. But if the user had control over all the parts, then they could go through the migration plan. Or in the case of like an API server metric, if that's hidden from a user and not accessible, then maybe the cloud provider could orchestrate it and provide some sort of migration. So like there is a path, but the best we can do probably is just to provide a feature that will always stay opt-in, and then let people who want to do the migration turn it on so that they can get the benefits of it. And that's probably like as far as we can go, unless Prometheus does something new and fancy to make that easier.
Start with that, like as a quick start for the native histograms, and then follow up with the Prometheus team to see what would it take for us to remove these flags to enable native histogram as a whole. Like that could be better or even stable criteria.
Yeah, I think so. You want to still treat it as a Kubernetes feature and use feature gates, or?
I think yeah, because we still don't know the impact that it would have. Like I think feature gate is the bare minimum we have to have.
Yeah,
Like just to make sure that we don't impact the platform as a whole, like Kubernetes as a whole.
it's either a feature gate or it's component config stuff, right? Like we could put it in either place.
And if we go beta, like unless we can fully like default native histograms and Prometheus deal with everything, I would still like require us to have like CLI flag in each component to enable native histograms.
Yeah. So
still gating, like no matter what happens, like gating the feature.
Why is it versus? Why is it not both?
I mean,
we could start with both. Like that's
it's like two different flags to turn
That's
to
true.
Boolean.
yeah.
It's like feels like
Either
overkill.
way, like you would have to introduce it if you go beta. Like you would have to introduce the new flags anyway. So might as well.
We could start with the new flags, or we could start with the feature gate and then graduate the feature gate and then add an opt-in flag. But then it's weird because if you had turned on the feature gate,
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
you don't need to turn on the feature gate anymore. Now you need to go over here and turn on this thing. So it feels like we should pick one or the other.
I think it should both though, because we could have the CLI flag right from the alpha stage, and the feature gate is separated from the the isolation need of being cautious about native histograms. So the feature flag goes in every single stage, but not the feature flag, the CLI flag for all components. It goes through all graduation levels, but the graduation itself does not depend on it. So we don't need to have it, perma beta or something like that. So it goes GA, but the feature flag still remains,
Yeah.
and the expectations are still, the users can expect the same thing.
Yeah, I feel like just having the CLI flag seems reasonable to me. Like I don't see the need
That's what
for
I was going to say. I'm pretty sure we could convince like anyone that will review the cap that like we would use CLI flag and we wouldn't like remove them like for at least like until the whole graduation of the feature.
I
Similar
would,
to what would a feature gate do, but like way stricter.
yeah,
Right. It's a feature
In-
gate that intentionally always stays opt-in.
Yeah. And for our tracking purposes, I guess.
Yeah.
When we're making major changes to the feature. Makes sense.
Cool.
so it's just that, with the feature flag, I think surrounding concern is, we would have a cap to support that feature flag, and with that cap, we could, inform users about the breakages. For example, the alerts that would happen. So with every single stage,
a cap. Like
We still
even
have
if we don't have a feature gate, we can still go through a cap. It's just that the component flag would be like kind of a version of a feature gate that is never turned in by default.
Yep.
Because like with
Yeah.
feature gate, you are bound by the fact that like once you reach beta, you enable it by default at all cost, and then once it reaches stable, you remove the flag as a whole. But like with the component flag, you don't have these problems. You can just set the expectations.
Yeah, we could have, there's so many caps there were no feature gates for them. So yeah, I don't know, I forget. For some reason. That makes sense.
Cool. We're over time.
Yeah.
But thanks for staying on.
Thank you all. Nice to see you.
Yeah. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.